Dear Minister, thank you so much for being with us here today in the studio of TV Rain. I really appreciate this opportunity. And first of all, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
Because your family history is amazing and it's really interesting to us in particular because you have some ties with Russia.
Yes.
And as I understand, Alexandra Petrovna Ollongren, Akanishnikova, was invited in 1875 by Grand Duchess Maria Fedorovna, wife of Alexander III, Russian Tsar, to be a mentor and grammar teacher to her sons, Grand Dukes Nicholas and George. Do you feel any connections with Russia? I mean, how does it influence you? What do you feel about it?
Yeah, of course, I know that there is this family connection. And my grandfather was born in Russia. And actually, he then, from this family, he fled Russia during the Russian Revolution. And he ended up in the Netherlands Indies as a Russian refugee. And that's why my father became a Dutchman. And he got the Dutch nationality. And that's why I am Dutch. So this is part of my history. And actually, of course, we have the Soviet Union, we had Russia. And it's the Ollongren family is an old Finnish-Swedish family. So there are many connections to different countries that all, of course, influence my personal way of looking at things, yes.
And maybe you're so tolerant to, contemporary refugees, people from Russia, political emigres, who are obliged and forced to leave the country.
Yeah. No, I think definitely, because, I know from firsthand, from my own family history, how important it is that if you have to leave your country, if you are a refugee, you have to have somewhere to go and you have to get the opportunity to start a life and to contribute again to where you are received with open arms. And I think that is what my family has had. It feels like a privilege, and you always feel you also have to do something back. And now we live in these difficult times for the people in Ukraine, but of course also for Russian people who are also targeted by the Putin and regime and the Kremlin, that we have to welcome those people and to give them the opportunity to work and to live here.
And you do. Thank you for that. You were appointed as a minister in January 2022, right before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Yes.
So I assume it is a tough challenge, right? You have started to work at this position and the war has started.
Yes.
And this being a defense minister during a war is something that you could not imagine, I assume, I suppose, before you were appointed.
No, absolutely. You're right. Of course, we saw things building up. We were worried. And one of the first things I asked when I became a defense minister was to have daily briefings on the situation on the border of Ukraine. And we had been warned, of course, in 2014 and even earlier. But I don't think that anybody could have imagined where we would be today after 2.5 years of large-scale invasion, that we would have a large-scale war raging on the European continent with trenches, with tens of thousands of people dead, wounded, and also not our role in all of this. I think we immediately decided as Dutch government and me as Minister of Defense that we should support Ukraine with weapons, lethal aid to a country neighboring Europe. That's a huge step. And not only we, but all countries in Europe have stepped up to support Ukraine and many more around the world, rallying behind Ukraine because it's a just cause, because Ukraine has the right to self-defense, because it's an illegal invasion. It has to be stopped. We cannot tolerate that this type of aggression is rewarded.
I will ask you questions about the weaponry that you have mentioned. But before, just a week ago, 9 days ago, you arrived with an unannounced visit to Kyiv. And this is not a first visit. I know that you're very active in terms of Ukraine, supportive of Ukraine. But this time, after 2.5 years of this terrible war, what's your impression? Has anything changed?
Yes, things have changed. I think that the country itself is really suffering. We see especially the energy infrastructure is hit. More than 30%, even up to 50% has been targeted by Russia. I mean, it's summertime now, but we know that Ukraine has to prepare for the winter. And you have to have electricity, you have to have your heating in order. So the country is disrupted. But at the same time, what I also see is resilience. And I see people are as convinced as they were in the beginning of
They're
the
not
righteousness
tired,
of their
fatigue.
cause. No, I think sometimes we talk about war fatigue, but I think the fatigue is more on our side
Yes,
than on the
absolutely.
Ukrainian side. And that's why I always say there is no, we cannot have any war fatigue. I mean, if they were tired in Ukraine and would stop fighting, then there would be no Ukraine anymore. And they can only fight with our help. So let's not allow for war fatigue in our societies. Let's not get used to this war. It has to stop.
Was Zelensky asking you for something in particular?
Well, I think we have very close contact with President Zelensky and with his team, and I have a direct contact with the Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov. And we have such a good working relationship, and such a good coordination so it's mostly talking about what else might you need? How could we speed things up? How are we doing on the different various projects that we're in? And I think we're all looking now at, are there new ways to explore? Are there different things we can do differently to improve the situation? And it's, of course, getting more ammunition and getting it there quicker. Working on air defense with various countries, like the Patriot that we're working on now. Making sure that the F-16 project leads to actually having the capability in Ukraine.
So F-16, this is one of the steps that were so many talks and negotiations about and scandals during this last couple of years. Who could imagine that F-16 would actually be delivered to Ukraine? Yeah. Right now, as I understand, as soon as in this summer, F-16s would be delivered to Ukraine, Belgium, and from Netherlands as well. What does it actually change on the ground?
Well, like you said, going back to February 2022, some countries were talking helmets.
Absolutely,
we went from helmets to howitzers, and we went from howitzers to tanks, to air defense, and also to F-16. So, I mean, we've really made huge steps in that. And I think we all knew at the time, also when we decided to provide the F-16s, that it was going to be a long journey, because it's really difficult to fly an F-16. And even when you know how to fly it, you also have to know how to fight with it and how to use it for your air defense in an integrated way. So that's not easy. But I'm really glad that some countries joined forces, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, the United States, of course, and others. And we need all of them. And we need Ukraine, and we need Ukrainian pilots, and we need the Ukrainian technicians, the infrastructure in Ukraine. And all those pieces have to be put together to provide Ukraine with a working capability that really strengthens their position. And that, I think, we are on schedule. I hope, as from this summer, that the actual airframes will be delivered to Ukraine. First the Danish ones, then the Dutch. But the most important thing is that everything is in place and everybody's ready. Otherwise, it's no use, because it's not going to change the war overnight. It's going to strengthen Ukraine, but it will take time to integrate it into the whole armed forces.
So we cannot expect any changes right now, as you say. But there is one more conversation, dispute maybe even, about the red lines that Ukraine should have or should not have. And you have recently said that there should not be any red lines for Ukraine. It concerns the question of targeting the military objects on the Russian territory, as I understand. What would be the geography of the strikes? It is important, as I understand. And I suppose there are military objects in Moscow, for example, and other cities and regions of Russian Federation. You understand the risks?
Absolutely. But I think as a Minister of Defense, I try not to sit on the chair of our military. The generals, the Chief of Defense, they have to take the military decisions.
Yes.
And what we say, I say as Minister of Defense, and my government says, is that when we give those weapons to Ukraine, it's up to them to decide on how to use them in their self-defense. It has to be self-defense, as stated in Article 51 of the UN Charter. And of course, we ask Ukraine to comply with humanitarian international law. But when you are defending yourself, sometimes you have to defend on the other side of the border, because you're attacked from the other side of the border. So there are military targets that you have to be able to take out. Otherwise, you're fighting with your hands behind your back. And that is our position. So use the weapons, use them in self-defense, and use them wisely, because we want Ukraine to be able to win this war and push Russia back.
So we're talking about the objects that are deployed at the border.
We're talking
only.
about military targets that you need to take out, because that's where the attacks are coming from. Where they are, I mean, they can be, of course, very close to the border. They can also be further away, but that's not up to me to say. That has to be a military decision taken by Ukraine.
Okay, but if we talk about the political decisions, are you ready for Putin's answer if the answer is there? We don't know whether there would be any reactions or not be any reactions. We've seen different types of behavior coming from Moscow. We see the aggressive statements, right? Do you think that there is a possibility of some kind of answer, military answer, coming from Moscow?
There is always the possibility and the risk. I mean, there's been lots of rhetorics from the Kremlin, from Putin himself. There has been rhetoric about red lines, about the use of nuclear weapons. But at the same time, we must not forget that this whole invasion of Ukraine by Russia is illegal. That Russia is attacking the whole country, not only the parts that they have invaded and annexed, but the whole country, all the way to the border to Poland with airstrikes. That is illegal. It has to stop. Ukraine has every right to defend itself against that. So I think we should not be afraid of these rhetorics and these threats of escalation. We should look at what is happening and what does Ukraine have to do to defend itself. And we should stand very firm on that.
Absolutely. But what I see, for example, on Russian television is threatening Netherlands, for example.
Yeah.
Like precisely.
Yeah.
They're saying Netherlands is a country which is so active in supporting of Ukraine and so on and so forth. We should, and there are different options, like strike Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can say it. I mean, they do say it.
They do say it. Yeah.
Do you think
I think it's rhetorics. It's trying to scare us. It's trying to divide us. And we cannot let that happen. So we have to stay united and we have to stay firm in our support of Ukraine, because they have the right on their side and they need our support. So let's not get scared by the fear-mongering that Putin is doing, and others, of course.
So what Putin is doing right now is getting closer to the North Korea. He is in North Korea right now, and he's signing deals, including a deal which is about the mutual support of the parties in case of aggression, quote. So does it look like a problem to you?
Well, you know, if I look at Ukraine and the friends and partners they have, it's a huge number of countries, all of them strong military powers. And then I look at Russia and Putin and his friends. And then he has North Korea and Iran. Well, not the friends that I would like to have, but unfortunately, countries who do have weapons to provide Russia with. And that's dangerous. So, yes, we have to be aware of these new friendships that Russia creates, because there is a dependency, there are weapons going to Russia, and there's something going back in return. And I think these are the autocracies that present a danger not only to their neighboring countries, but also for the world order, as I think we want to have it. And so we must be very cautious. There are sanctions against those countries. We have to enforce these sanctions as much as possible. And we have to worry about the fact that there are flows going to Russia that strengthen their war economy and that strengthen their war effort.
Do you think that Russia, together with North Korea, is stronger?
Russia, together with North Korea, Iran, and also other ways in which they successfully escape the sanctions, are a worry to us, yes.
Going back to Ukraine and situation on the front, do you think that Ukraine still can win this war?
I do. Because of two reasons. They have the support of many countries, and we will continue that support. So as long as they can muster also enough soldiers, military men and women, to fight the war and use the weapons that we will provide them with. Well, that's one part. They're very motivated. They have a real motivation, which is about freedom, which is about the future of their children. I see on the Russian side, yes, they've turned their economy into a war economy. But Russians are suffering, and Russians are being sent to the front just to die. And they're not motivated. They have to go, or they're very poor, and they do it for the money.
Yes.
But there is no real motivation behind it. But it is an autocracy. and they can, they can keep it up for a long time. But I think so can Ukraine. I mean, what is the goal of all of this? Is it to conquer Ukraine, to show that this, old Russian power or the Soviet Union, whatever, that is the righteous place for Moscow? Who really believes it? So Ukraine has to keep it up. We have to keep up our support. And I think it is possible for them to win.
How big the support can be? We hear the talks about sending the troops or at least military consultants to Ukraine from Europe. Would you do that? Would you take part in this war on the ground?
Well, I think we've always said there are no taboos. So about training Ukrainians, for instance, we're doing that in Poland, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in the UK and other places. We're training Ukrainian military. We're part of that effort already for more than 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that does not make us a partaker in the war itself. So I think that there should be no taboos. And if it's possible to train inside Ukraine, there is no reason, no principle, fundamental reason not to do that, if you could solve certain issues. And that does not mean that you are a part of the war, which is between Russia and Ukraine. And it is part of what we have to do to support Ukraine. So,
but no troops.
Well, the troops are already training.
Ukrainian but military. I mean, the boots on the ground.
But the boots on the ground, if you need to take part in the war itself, I think that is where we have to be very careful, because that is, of course, being part of the war. And as long as Russia has not attacked any of our countries, we are not at war with Russia. We are supporting Ukraine in their war with Russia.
Have you seen the Putin's offer, if I may call it an offer, to Ukraine? And what's your reaction on that?
I thought it was not very serious, quite honestly. Yeah, I think it was propaganda. It was targeted at disrupting the peace conference that was going on in Switzerland at the time. I think if you could negotiate yourself out of this war, Ukraine would do it. But you cannot negotiate with someone who's holding a gun against your head. And that's the situation now. So you need some real, serious proposals from Russia. Until then, it's impossible to negotiate.
So we're at the end of the conversation. I have just one question about the peace plan, I would say. We have we've been covering very closely the peace summit in Switzerland. They say it would be another summit, maybe in Saudi Arabia. Do you think that there is already an offer or any kind of strategy which would be okay for both sides, and in particular for Ukraine, of course?
Well, at least I see that Ukraine is putting forward proposals. Mm-hmm. And parts of these proposals, I think, are universal. So not using food as a weapon. I think it's a universal principle. Have nuclear safety, security. It's a universal interest.
But Russia says we don't understand what it is. We're not taking part in it. We were not invited. We don't want to be involved in this.
Yeah, but also accountability, which is something that we have been working on also from the Netherlands with teams, forensic teams, collecting evidence. So having that ready for when the war has ended and we can start the accountability. So there has to be a process. And I think that it's good that President Zelensky had put forward these issues. And like I said, if you want peace, then you have to have on both sides proposals and discussions and maybe a table with negotiations. At this point, it's still coming from one side and not from the other side. And I think it was good in Switzerland. There were several countries there who could play this role as an in-between between the two countries. I think that's something that you always need if you start negotiating. But unfortunately, no sign so far that Putin would be ready to negotiate.
Maybe this autumn in Saudi Arabia? Would you consider it as a chance?
I think, every chance there is to start peace talks is good. But at the same time, then there has to be some serious effort from the Russian side to show goodwill. And we've seen no goodwill. What we see is continuous effort, opening a new front north of Kharkiv, more troops being sent in, and an increase in the air attacks.
So let's see, maybe there would be a goodwill. Depends on the situation in Ukraine on the ground, as I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kajsa.
Most welcome.
I really appreciate that, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.